This is Critical Nonsense, our high-lowbrow show about culture, science, and tech. This week, I asked Joey about the lost art of falconry.
Woo! Zoobly zoo. Zoobly zoo. This is what a Joey sounds like if he were on the beloved and terrifying show Zoobly Zoo, public television from the 1980s. And this is what an executive producer and board panda Jess Vander sounds like.
Hi, this is Jess. I guess that's fair.
I was trying to think of an animal and board panda popped into my head. So
sounds good.
There we go. Do you remember that there was a show it was a Disney Channel show called like the Zoobles? It was like, I think it was called, nope, Zoobles is a different, Zoobles exist, but it's not.
Something else.
It was like a Disney Channel show in the 90s with these animals that were like animal hybrids.
Like Avatar: The Last Airbender, where you just like choose two animals and then it's like a kangaroo. Oh, it's like a kangaroo turtle.
Yeah, it was like some of the main characters were like a lion bee, a hippo bunny with wings, a kangaroo elephant.
Oh, there we go. That makes sense.
Yeah, it was like a moose seal.
Whoa.
Yeah, it was weird.
Does a moose seal live on land or in the water?
It looks more aquatic in the photos,
but still antlered.
Yeah, it still has the antlers. Yeah.
You know, how come aquatic beasts don't have an antler equivalent? Actually, how dare I say that? Like seahorses kind of have those little. Not really.
In these hybrids, the weird part is all of them have wings, I think. I think all of the Wuzzles had wings. The bunny hippo, is this a monkey rhino? I think. So the bee lion gets no special powers, despite the bee actually having wings. Just everyone gets wings in Wuzzleville.
In Wuzzleville, you can just, if you want it, you've got it.
Yeah.
No rules.
Well, now that we've done Wuzzle's Corner, a show from 1985, turns out I'm older than I thought. There's no housekeeping. We keep it clean. Jess, what do you have for us in our tangential animal corner?
We have a quick topic to talk about today. This weekend, I read a piece in the New York Times Magazine.
Oh, interesting. Other people read articles too, and it gives them things to think about.
How did this happen? Why do we always make fun of Joey for doing that when actually we all do it? Whatever. I was inspired. The article is titled "The Ancient Art of Falconry at the Jersey Shore," which I can't think of a hook that is more enticing. and the line underneath says, "How Ocean City cleared the gulls from its boardwalk with falcons and hawks." Basically what happened was folks at the Jersey Shore were like, all right, we seriously have a seagull problem, which turns out the population of seagulls in general is down, but they are more concentrated in certain areas because they're super flexible beasts and they know that they can steal French fries from children. But it's getting to like a point that's really troublesome in these public areas. And it's also it's really bad for tourist business. And so as a solution, they called this company East Coast Falcons, where this guy, Eric Swanson, and his team brought on what honestly should be made up, but they call raptors, which include
I was going to say, why are we not calling them raptors?
Which is a way cooler thing to call them. Falcons, hawks, eagles, and owls all can sit underneath this bucket of birds that can be trained to hunt small game in normal situations. But in this situation, they're used basically as like a scare tactic for the seagulls, who basically they tried so many other things, but really the only thing that worked was like having an actual predator who could at any moment go and snatch one of them to deter them and make them stay away. So they don't even end up hunting them because, like I said, the population of seagulls is not that high, and you don't want to disturb the ecosystem. But even just having hawks around is scary enough. Plus, the tourists love it because they're like, who's that guy with a hawk on his arm? And I just think it's such an incredible example of a creative use of what I think most would have otherwise considered a relatively lost art. And it just got me thinking, what else can happen when we find new uses for lost arts?
So this is sort of interesting because I had read a book
about maybe falconry.
No, a few months ago. There was one of Neil Stephenson's newer books called Termination Shock, and in it they brought in falconers to a sort of like secure site to punch drones out of the sky.
Whoa!
And I was like, first of all, interesting, like cool use of falcons, but then it turns out like it's a real thing. Like the military and like the Dutch police are using, like the Dutch police I think are using eagles to like punch the drones out, and like the Air Force is using falcons and other raptors to do this.
By which you mean like send the birds on a suicide mission into the engine?
No, so they will like swoop down, and because they're so effective and trained, they basically just like knock it off of its kilter and then like tip it, and a lot of, in the case of like, I think in the Netherlands, what they're trying to like protect airspace around the airport from, commercial drones that people would buy or whatever. So like,
I see. The smaller type of drone.
Yeah.
Not like
in the book they had put some protection on the falcon's feet, I believe, to like protect their legs from any of the propellers or whatever, but they were just like taking the drones out of the sky. And I was like, that's, to your point, right? It's like, how many falconers are left? And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, you know what would be really good for this particular problem? Falcons. We need them. We need raptors to solve this challenge, and there's nothing else that will do. I think about this too, of like, who are the remnant stonemasons these days? Like there was a time where stonemasonry was like the pinnacle of artistry, like all of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles are named after artists from that period, right? Like, Michelangelo's sculpting and like just like the perfect shaping of marble, and like who, if you needed that today, like all of a sudden there's a dire need for some palace to be built. Like who are you going to call? Who is good at that these days? This is what I want to know. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It's interesting when you think about something like this as a form of technology, which we should and can have a discussion about whether or not the knowledge of how to train and use falcons would be considered a technology. Like, it's probably in a gray area. But what's interesting is like we've mentioned this before, but there's this sort of concept within technology that like any technology that is invented and sufficiently used, like, never disappears. There's,
like the wheel.
Yeah, but like the typewriter. Like, there are still people who are making and using typewriters, even though it's not like the primary form of word processors getting used today. Or like COBOL, the government mainframe language that like all the people who like knew how to use COBOL were like retired or dead, and then all of a sudden there was like a big need for COBOL programmers because the like a bunch of those mainframes were still running on COBOL and there's no one left. There was an instance in my last building that I lived in, the water heater broke, and the building was from like the 1920s maybe, and it was a big building. It was an old Catholic school building that got converted, and it had this mass. They talked about the water heater. I never saw it myself. Like, it was like an old military ship or something. They're like, it's massive, it's complicated, it's confusing. There are like 5 people left in the country that knew how to fix it, and they had all retired, and the guy who used to fix it had retired to Texas. So when it broke while I was living there, they had to like contact him, pull him out of retirement, and like pay him a lot of money to come back to the building to fix the water heater.
You're the only man who knows.
Yeah.
I mean, there's certainly the downsides where it's just that whatever technology or art has just simply been outdated, like the MTA signal system, where there are parts of the New York City subway that the transportation association here has to manufacture themselves because no one else makes them anymore, and they just have to, out of momentum, continue to make these things. And maybe that isn't exactly what we mean. Instead, it's like, did you see the new Top Gun movie? This is like maybe a surprising left turn that I would find this a really entertaining film, but without spoiling anything, a key component of the film is where like it is, even though there are all these modern fighter jets and planes out there, it is required for a specific use case to use like really old planes that like the young whippersnappers don't like. There's like, what is this antique that we have to be using? It's like, well, it actually is capable of doing something that our new tech like doesn't know how to do. I'm just imagining that like plumber guy or like the water heater dude who just like has knowledge that has been outdated in other contexts, except obviously not in this one.
Yeah. I mean, again, going back to like a Neil Stephenson book, because I've been reading a different one of his books recently. I had never read Snow Crash, and I was like, oh, I'll read it. I got like a free Audible download, so I was like, oh, I'll go back and read that one because it was one of his early ones. And there's like a whole conversation about how like at any given time there's like 5 to 10 people in the world who can speak Sumerian, which is like a weird, probably useless skill, but like someone has the passion to like train them. And it's like, there are 6 people you can talk to right now using this skill that you've developed. That's all that exists. Or like sword fighting is like another like sort of ancient skill that people have like in recent years become more interested in because you can, some of it is probably like with these things like the long tail of the internet allows you to find someone else who's interested in sword fighting, and you can like train and learn with or whatever it is. But I would consider sword fighting in the category probably of falconry that like takes a long time to master and like a lot of determination and passion and probably narrow use cases. But when you need it, like who are you going to call when you need a consult for a film that's like a period piece for a certain time in a certain culture? Like,
who's going to know exactly all the moves and the swords? You should talk to this like one person. The only person on the planet who can answer that question. See, this is the thing. I guess what this takes me to is that there is no wrong pursuit, no matter how niche, because you never know that you might just be the key to clearing all the seagulls, and who knows what.
I mean, what's interesting to me about this too is sort of the cultural dynamic of how this knowledge is historically maintained, right? Like falconry was traditionally like, I think it came out of the steppes, like the Eurasian steppe. I'm not positive. I know it was used among like sort of Mongoliad type of, like Mongol tribes and horse people of the Eurasian steppe. I don't know if that's where it originated, but it was sort of like used for hunting, for scouting, for sending messages and things of that nature. And so but it was passed on through shared knowledge, like a need and orientation. And we've like sort of the technocratic lifestyle pushes us towards more efficient solutions that are probably relatively are broader in nature. Like technology solutions often have broad use cases, at least in sort of like modern computer-based technology solutions. However, they're more rigid within the realms that they can operate. And you see this a lot with like cooking right now. A lot of cultural traditions that were historically passed along and were sort of being like dying away as a byproduct of like industrial foods and sort of like large migration from smaller rural places to urban centers where sort of the history and traditions of food were being lost. Like there is a movement, I can't say how significant it is or isn't, but at least among like the culinary world, like a lot of the people who are getting the most attention are sort of revitalizing ancient approaches, ancient techniques, and understanding that there was significant knowledge and value in those techniques, but were sort of being written off as antiquated because they weren't, oftentimes like the approach or the knowledge of how to make something didn't come with also sort of the underlying nature, or maybe was less efficient or, scalable, but like had a value and it was being carried by culture. And so like the homogenization of culture oriented through sort of like a technocratic orientation to our use of kind of modern computer technology has like put a damper on it. And it feels like there's a little bit of a pendulum swing back into these like weirder, niche, narrower bits of technology, whether that's food, falconing, or something else.
Yeah, I think, what another way to think maybe about how I'm hearing what you're saying is like, just because we, for the longest time, we're just excited to focus on the things that we could do or things that were new, does not, as we're realizing, always mean that it is the best or the most interesting way about that thing. And maybe just because there's new technology doesn't mean that it doesn't wear off in its effectiveness, or that we've seen it all before and we want to try something, a preparation for a dish that hasn't been tasted in goodness knows how long, or never in this part of the world. But it's a new place to explore, even if it has already been trodden before, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. I think like the solutions that we oriented towards over the past 150 to 200 years with the multiple industrial revolutions we're solving different problems than we're thinking about now, sort of, at least in like major industrialized nations. Those solutions were enabling many people to be fed, to pull people out of like food scarcity, starvation, whatever. They weren't designed to sort of like improve the qualia or experience of eating. They weren't necessarily even designed for like quality or caliber of nutrition. They were designed for caloric dispersal. And in that way, they were very good, right?
Yeah, right, right.
But
Lunchables. No, Lunchables.
Yeah,
are not
exactly.
good.
Lunchables are like
goodness.
great for caloric dispersion, not great for, it is a like giant sodium bomb to give to children. But the like now where you're, you know, unevenly, but nonetheless in industrialized nations, you're moving towards like a version or a form of post-scarcity society, right? Like right now with sort of major supply chain disruptions based on the invasion of Ukraine or COVID, that is being upended. But at the same time, because there's less scarcity, it allows people to return to techniques that maybe are less efficient, less scalable, but more valuable, more interesting, more beneficial for other reasons.
Or maybe even scalable. Like I think I've mentioned it on this show before, but I was fascinated by this exploration into the peatlands in Congo and like what a tremendous but also kind of terrifying fulcrum that could impact climate change rests in like these swampy lands that right now contain a ridiculous amount of CO2. And it's just, I don't know, like it's just looking in interesting places that, right, to solve new challenges or maybe old challenges that are newly important.
Yeah. And I think like there is the last thing that I'm thinking about before we wrap this up is the fact that we always historically had a better, again, pre-industrial revolution, maybe a more integrated approach to our interactions with nature, whether that's through domestication or just being forced to live off the land, like having a little bit more of a finger on that stuff. And we're developing sort of bits of technology that were like natural in origin, maybe for lack of a better term. Like, and so you're like the fact that people are using falcons to solve this problem instead of drones as an example is sort of interesting, right? It's leveraging the fact that seagulls are like biologically, genetically coded to be afraid of raptors, and so like
predator.
You need someone who is capable of training them and applying that technology. But again, you only need like 2-3 people to cover a big area that understand falcons. But in the same way, like there are places where they've started to experiment with using like crows to be able to like clean up micro garbage that is still sort of like pollutant, eyesore, whatever it is, right? Like being able to pick up like cigarette butts and things of that nature and deposit them in places for rewards. Yeah. Right. But like, or, turning to mushrooms and like certain types of mycelium to like clean up oil spills. Like as opposed to, coming up with some like really complicated like Rube Goldberg machine type of like beach dredger that is like filtering out sand or something like that. But it's interesting like to turn back to nature and pre-existing technologies that we knew for a long time and used for a long time and just sort of abandoned.
Yeah. there's something beautiful in whatever was like the first instinct to solve blank. That maybe is a good idea. Or, it could even just be something worth keeping around, even if it's just 5 people who speak Sumerian.
Find your 5.
Find your 5. Are you the next falconer? I don't know.
Well, Jess, this brings us to your Falcon corner.
Wow.
Raptor corner. Did I ever tell you that when Becky and I got married, we discussed making up a new name, and the Raptors was my suggestion.
So
and it got a little traction, but eventually fell off.
Died out.
Yeah.
Wow. I don't know if I can comment on whether I think that was a good or a bad idea.
But it's the name of my Wi-Fi network.
I don't know. I feel like instead of a recap, I would just be really interested to have our listeners think about what lost arts they have heart for and believe have some modern reason for existing. I don't know. If you have thoughts about that, send us a note. We want to know.
Hamster farming.
My gosh. Don't.
1-800-HAMSTER hands.
Go get your hamster hams.
Critical Nonsense is a Sylvain production.
Brought to you by Owl from Winnie the Pooh, who's actually a vicious predator. Did you know owls can destroy their prey with their epic feet? Read about it. It's crazy.
And their faces are parabolic discs. Thanks, Christopher Robin. As always, we'd like to thank our executive producer and children's novel ruiner, Jess Vander.
Thanks, Joey. I'd also like to thank sound engineer and technologist for our show, Alex Contel. Yikes, that was terrible.
We'd like to thank our programming coordinator and just falconer of my soul,
just
Les Jacobs.
Falconer of my soul. We'd also like to thank our production help and those with eagle eyes, Sarah Gilbert and Nora Mestrich.
And as always, thanks, Ellen.
Sorry, Ellen.
Special thanks.
Birds.
Falcons.
Bees.
We didn't talk
Bears.
about buzzards.
Battlestar Galactica.
Buzzards are falcons, but they're not really
Are they?
They'll just eat the dead seagulls. They're not maybe you could bring in a buzzard to clean up the dead jellyfish or something like that.
Isn't that so interesting? The fact that they have to eat things. It's like the scavenger stomach that can only eat things that have already a little bit been digested, which is why they need to eat rotted things. It's oh,
yikes.
Yo.
Oh, I see you dead in the desert. You look delicious. Special thanks to Neil Stevenson. I don't know.
Yeah,
I like his books.
His work. We love his work.
Special thanks to
East
Science
Coast
videos.
Falcons for your creative solutions to challenges.
Special thanks to companies that are working with mushrooms to solve big problems.
Yep.
Like Meaty, MEATI, an alternative meat company that is using mycelium.
What if we just change this whole show to be about how much we believe in the future of mushrooms? Because I am ready to just change the whole course of this show to just be about bringing that to life.
Jess's Mushroom Corner.
There's so much potential. All right, thanks for listening.
Thanks, love you, bye.
Bye.
1-800-HAMSTER hams. Get your hams today.
Hi, everybody. My name is Sean, and we, over at Hamster Hams, have the best honey glazed hamster hams that you've ever looked for this Easter season.
Oh, sure, you've heard of pig ham, Boring.
Womp womp. And gerbil ham, forget that.
No time.
But hamster hams.
Oh, that tender hamster meat just rolling off the bone.
It's so tangy and twingy.
Can you taste the tang?
And don't forget the side of coleslaw.
It may take a lot of hamsters to get these hams, but you're gonna love them.
Can we have hamster hams for dinner?
Kids love hamster hams.
I'd really like a hamster ham. Uncle Charlie, stop it.
1-800-HAMSTER-HAMS. Get your hams today.